Thank you, Councillor, for having us. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day, and this is episode 3. At first, I just want to get started with you've lived in Hamilton for over a decade now. What made you choose Hamilton? Like, what made you really sit there and sit down and be like, okay, I want to live here, I want to settle here?
It wasn't a super deliberate choice, I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
I was living in Guelph with my partner at the time, and we didn't want to stay in Guelph. And this is a weird thing to say, perhaps. I like Guelph, but Guelph felt kind of sorted out.
Mm-hmm.
It felt nice. It felt really tidy around the edges, and there wasn't a lot of space there for, I think, the kinds of conversations I wanted to have and the kinds of challenges I think that are interesting about cities. And so my partner and I literally just rented a car, drove around Ontario and in the areas where our family lived, and we went to Hamilton, drove down King Street, drove down James Street, ended up at Mulberry Cafe, had a coffee, and we're like, yeah, we like this place. This seems like a good place to be. My aunt lived here when I was a kid, so I had been here a few times, and I'd been to concerts and different things. And when I was doing student journalism, I'd come here to cover some stories, and knew the city a little bit,
Yeah.
but just loved. It felt gritty. It felt real. People felt passionate, and the conversations I overheard in that coffee shop were other people talking about Hamilton. Like, that's a really Hamilton thing, is that when you go to Oshawa, you don't necessarily always hear people talking about Oshawa Council or the issues going on in Oshawa, the municipal issues. Here, people talk about it, right?
Yeah.
They talk about their disappointments. They talk about the things that are going on, how they feel. So that was really inspiring to me to see so much civic engagement. Like, you have a very, very, very engaged population in Hamilton, especially downtown, and you could just feel that at the time when I was here. So that's the reason I moved here. Yeah.
It's a really great answer, and Ward 2 is happier that you're here now. So I just wanted to go some over your past experiences. You were a teacher, you were a small business owner, you have multiple different degrees, you were a union leader,
Yeah.
And you were a community organizer. How did these past experiences sort of help how you lead now?
Yeah, I think the most formative experience for me was my education. So doing a humanities education for me really expressed that human piece, the questions that you can ask, how you can dig into things and learn more. And so I spent all my time doing critical thinking when I was in school. All you do is you evaluate these sources that you're reading about historical figures and ask yourself, does that seem real? Does that seem not real? What are the questions I want to ask myself? What am I reflecting on? And so that really made me an inquisitive, naturally inquisitive kind of person. And so when I came to Hamilton, I just was still at that time working as the president of a union, and it was Guelph's largest labor union.
Wow.
And I was going back and forth a little bit. And I started getting a bit more involved here in talking to labor folks and learning from them. And then at the neighborhood level, someone sent a little note to my mailbox saying, hey, I'm your neighbor. We all received these notices about a development in the neighborhood. Can we get together and talk? I'm confused. Maybe thought maybe other people in the neighborhood might want to talk about it. And so I said, sure. And we got together, we read the notice together, and both of us kind of scratched our heads and thought, what does this mean? We're reading all this legalistic planning information, and neither of us knew what it meant. But as a reader, as someone who spent a decade in that field, I could make more sense of it than most people. I learned, this is what I think this means.
Especially being inquisitive, like you said.
Yeah, and I just got curious.
Yeah.
And that curiosity led me to municipal politics. I got involved in the neighborhood association. We started holding meetings. I started meeting more and more people, and they kept asking, hey, have you ever thought about running here in Hamilton as a city council? And I thought, not really. But now that you're suggesting it, maybe that is something I could be interested in doing. So I ran in 2018 and I lost. I got 30% of the vote. Yeah, I did, which was really a good thing for someone who only lived here for 3.5 years.
Yeah,
so I was pretty encouraged by that, and ran again in 2022.
And here we are now.
Yeah.
Amazing. Great answer. No, I just wanted to go over a little bit about you representing Hamilton's downtown, especially like Ward 2 area.
Yeah.
It's probably the most diverse and debated part of the city as well. I know a lot of things go on here. What do most people misunderstand about downtown, like more specifically, like Ward 2 area? Like,
number one, right? People live here. That's the number one thing I think people misunderstand about downtown. We often think of downtown as these places we get something from. I go downtown because I want to shop. I go to the farmer's market. It's extractive in a way. I'm taking something from this area and I'm bringing it back to where I spend most of my time. I visit it, right? This idea of visiting downtown. And so what we don't think about always when we're going through downtowns, especially for driving through downtowns and not getting out of our car and walking through downtowns, because when you walk, you see things at a human level. When you drive through downtowns, you see things as you pass that are quickly. And what does it forms a kind of mental register for you? And you might see somebody experiencing homelessness. You might see something going on where there's a dirty side of the road with litter or something, right? You might see other kinds of things happening. And that gives you an impression, a really quick impression of what's happening. But people live here 24/7. And the majority of people who live here, of the 40,000 residents and businesses that live downtown, 80% are renters. And that is a thing I think that most people just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I think that because what we've done in politics, I think in media, I think in the way we understand who constituents are, I should say, is we focus on people who own property. We focus on traditional homeowners only,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of forget about folks who are renters or tenants. And honestly, that makes them feel like they're disengaged and that they don't have a voice. So a big part of what I've been doing here, because I also am a renter, and
Yeah.
I think probably the first one that's been a Ward 2 city councillor. So I understand the situation renters are in, what that looks like for them. When I knock on doors, I hear their concerns. That's the biggest piece I think is missing for most people. They think of downtown as a place to get entertainment, to go to restaurants, to maybe see a movie. And I don't think they think about the fact that there's 30,000 people living here who are renting their homes,
Mm-hmm.
and what that experience looks like,
Yeah.
and how that doesn't really necessarily match up with the rest of the city. Because
Mm-hmm.
when you get to the mountain, or when you get to other parts of the city, it's basically the complete opposite, right? You have a switch where most people, sometimes in some wards, 80%, 90% of people own their own property, own their home, live in a single family home, aren't renting. So how do you make everybody aware of that? And so I've been trying my best, but the message hasn't completely gotten out there yet.
Well, you've been doing great. You do Substack posts, you release like newsletters. I know you're one of the only wards to be able to actually do that. I'm somebody who's around renters all the time, especially down at McMaster University.
Of course,
Like most of my friends are renters.
Yeah.
And a lot of them don't really understand. I know we'll talk about it in like small circles and ask, oh, like why are renting prices so high? Like what are people doing about it? Like what are your thoughts about it?
Yeah.
And if you had to explain to somebody who had no idea, like let's say me, and I have a very small idea, but if I had no idea about like why renting prices are the way that they are, and what we could possibly do to mitigate that as a city hall. I understand like the multi-level governance structure, but like what if you had to explain it to me in like sort of a simple way, like what's going on as like a concerned somebody who lives in Ward 2, let's just say that.
I'd say there's two major issues when it comes to rental prices. One of them is related to the federal government, and one's related to the provincial government. The municipality doesn't really have a say when it comes to the financial markets for housing. But what we see in other countries is that the state or the federal government intervenes to regulate things. They say, geez, it's getting rough. There's not affordability out there. People aren't able to rent at affordable rates. And they come in and they regulate the industry. They put in rent freezes.
Mm-hmm.
They make sure more affordable housing is built. And they really tackle homelessness at that federal level to make sure it's being addressed as a priority. We're not doing that here. And so as a result, cities are kind of left on their own. But they're also left on their own by the province. So they're left on their own twice. And I'll say this because we invest more than the federal and provincial governments combined in housing and homelessness in Hamilton. The city does. Even though it's not technically our responsibility, these responsibilities are really federal and provincial responsibilities. We still invest more than they do combined. So that's part of the problem. The other big piece of the problem is Doug Ford. So this guy's come in 2018, and he's gotten rid of rent control.
Mm-hmm.
So what that means is that if you're living in a unit somewhere, and let's just say that you've been living there for 10 or 20 years, right? At a certain point, you had rent control in that unit, especially if the unit was built before 2018 or occupied before 2018. Well, in newer builds after 2018, there's no more rent control. And so if you go into a unit that has been built after that period, they can jack the rent up in exponentially, essentially, year after year. And they can do it to match the market. So if the market says the demand for rent is, let's say like it is now $1,800 to $2,000 a month for a one-bedroom apartment downtown,
mm-hmm.
that means that you are going to have to pay that rent. So what happens to a lot of folks, because the building stock downtown is quite old, is that in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, when those buildings were built, let's just say they've been living there for that time or a little bit after. Maybe they're paying $900 a month right now for a one-bedroom apartment, and every year it goes up a couple of percent at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if they left that apartment, right, then they could bring that up to the market rate. So there's pressure for landlords to get people out of their apartments where they have the rent control in it and get it out to the market, raise the rent, and make it higher.
Mm-hmm.
So you can imagine most of the people who are living in those apartments with some form of rent control are afraid because they maybe have a disability. Maybe they have other fixed expenses. They may be retired and relying on old age security or Canada pension programs to survive. And they can afford to scrape by right now with all the increased costs, but they can't do that if the rent triples for them or doubles for them.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of the problem I think right now that we're facing, and that's why rent is so high. It's just an unregulated housing market here.
Okay.
And as housing prices go up, cost of buying a house, usually rental prices go up with them, right? And so there's just kind of inflated market right now where all these things are at high prices for no real good reason, except that we're letting the free market do this. Housing is a human right as far as I'm concerned. That isn't just a slogan or something nice to say.
I believe it is under the UN as well.
Sure, but you have to put it into practice. You can say it and you can adopt it as a philosophy, but if you don't put it into practice, it doesn't matter. Yeah. So the federal government doesn't put it into practice as far as I'm concerned, either does the provincial government. If they did, they would say to themselves, we have to stop letting people profit off of housing. Profiting off housing shouldn't be an income generating career. We shouldn't be able to profit off other people's living conditions. And that's where I think we get into trouble in Canada, especially, is we have a landlord class who's largely unregulated, who's in this for an investment, in this to get ahead, in this to make money. And when we think about making money off the living conditions of people who can barely afford to get by, then we get into an ethical conundrum. And so I think the federal government has to step in at some point and regulate this market.
Yeah, no, I think that was a really great answer. You broke it down very succinctly for me, especially. And I wasn't really aware, especially about like I understood obviously that some of the market was inflated, but I wasn't aware of like the connection of what that had to do in terms of like renting prices, and especially when it comes to these tenants that are being exploited almost.
Yeah, what we've done, one thing we've done which has been really great is that because people are trying to pressure people out of their apartments so they can raise their rent, one of the things that we're doing and we have done in the last couple of years is put in a Renovictions bylaw.
Narinder Nan pushed
that's
that.
Right. Yeah, she did. And when she pushed that and we put it through, it prevents people now from doing this arbitrary renoviction. The province won't accept it, though. They won't put it in their actual laws and legislation. That's why we had to do it at the municipal level.
Yeah.
This is some of the problem we have here. In British Columbia, when they did this, a city brought that in. British Columbia government said, wow, this is great legislation. This could be something we use province-wide. They took that legislation from the city and they put it in their laws at the province.
Wow.
Here, no such thing is happening. So cities are left on their own to put this legislation into effect and try and make this change. And really, again, something that's outside their responsibility.
What's the reasoning on why the provincial government were just like, no, we're not going to chuck this into provincial legislation? Like, was there like a statement behind that, or?
Well, no, and they wouldn't come out and say it, but I will say that I think the priority for them is not renters. The priority for them is not tenants. They just launched a new bill called Bill 60, which is an attempt to undercut renters further and get rid of more of the rent control that
even
exists.
More.
So they're trying to come after them even more. As far as I'm concerned, the progressive conservative government in this province is concerned about their donors, and their donors are more likely to be landlords than they are to be tenants.
What's one change or one sort of semblance or beginning of change that you've seen that gives you some sort of hope?
Well, we've been trying a lot to organize tenants and talk to them about these issues, and it's pretty difficult. Look, I'll be straight up with you. When a white dude of my height knocks on your door in an apartment, your first thought is this person here on behalf of my landlord? Is this person here to represent the landlord? And there's a certain sense of fear. And I've had those conversations with people saying, wow, I didn't know you were my counselor. I thought you were my landlord. No counselor's ever knocked in my building before. And so we've started to change that. We've been going out and knocking in buildings. We've been spending a lot of time engaging. We started a tenant council, and we're starting to see people letting the fear shed a little bit, looking around and recognizing, wait a minute, it's not just me alone here. The very first time I told a room full of hundreds of people that 80% of the people who live here are renters, there was an audible gasp in the room. No one knew. And so people see each other more now and realize, wait a minute, I'm more likely when I'm out in the street with people, there's more likely renters I'm walking beside or standing beside or walking behind than it is somebody who's not in that same rental and the same housing class. Why I think it's important is because I don't think we should be divisive about this. It's not about property owners against renters. But I think that because renters are often put in a situation because of the way that municipalities are set up, like let's be clear, in the 19th century, these municipalities, including Hamilton, were set up for property holders. Like the whole premise of all democracy really is around land ownership. That's it, property ownership. And so it favors people who own property. If you don't, you're kind of seen by the municipality structurally as a second class. And so in those movements, when I think we're talking about class solidarity, we're talking about class warfare, however you want to look at it, attacks on the working class, there needs to be some solidarity, and people are starting to see that. And so I'm really hopeful to see that people are seeing one another, understanding there's more and more of them. We're having tenant associations are now popping up in buildings. Our office is helping to make those meetings happen with people. But that's encouraging to me. I'm seeing that change happening. But there's a lot of also discouraging things that are going on at the same time, right? So there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of, I would call, hyper social media happening right now where people are kind of just aggressively aggressively on social media in
Mhm.
kind of a way that's there to undermine institutions, which doesn't really help. But the thing I'm seeing people doing is, as they always do in Ward 2, with the scrappy grassroots community, is coming together more and more, seeing one another more and more, organizing more and more, and standing up for the issues they
Yeah.
care about. Right.
Well,
So
we're stronger
that's
in
good.
unity as
Yeah,
well. Yeah.
it's true, and that's been really wonderful. I think the municipal government can do a lot of things. I put forward tons of motions to try and help, but ultimately, it's the communities that's going to come together and rally around these issues. We're the ones who are going to be able to address issues like community
Mhm.
safety. We're the ones who are going to be able to address issues like landlords doing things they shouldn't, by organizing, by standing up, by being public about it. So I've been seeing a lot more of that, which is great.
Amazing. That was a great answer on that. I had a quick question. I wanted to sort of pivot towards encampments. So
Mm-hmm.
we know that there's been an increase in encampments. The city has an encampment protocol, I believe. I believe it's more short term rather than long term focused. It's not a long term solution, and I know that there's debates about whether or not emergency shelter beds cost more than sustainable housing
Right.
or sustainable living. You're somebody who said that it's not a solution for anybody, including the people who are out there on the street,
Yeah.
especially when it's freezing cold out or rainy like it is today, to everybody around. If council could take one step this year to not even, well, possibly reduce the people outside, but sort of even take a step in the right direction toward that, what would that look like for you? What would that be?
Involving the people who are impacted the most.
Mhm.
And that's the most important thing. At one point, a couple of years ago, we were deciding to put the encampment protocol in place. And when we were doing that, we recognized, well, wait a minute, this is going to be kind of messy. It's not really going to work all the time. The rules are going to have to be sort of tweaked or figured out as time goes on. So, folks who lived outside, folks who are in encampments, folks who are deprived of housing, were all saying to us, what about us? How come we're not part of the conversation?
Mhm.
So we set up a bunch of engagement sessions. And the outcome of the engagement sessions was, well, maybe there shouldn't just be an encampment protocol. There should be some way of weaving in the people into that. So then people created something called the People's Protocol. And I went to council and said, can we have some consultation about this People's Protocol, evaluate what's in here, and see if we can include it in our protocol?
Mhm.
And council voted no to that.
Council voted no.
Voted no. So that voice has been missing from this process.
Mhm. And
And I think if we had people who were most impacted by this as part of the process, if they were able to participate in it and get their issues raised, I think we'd be doing a lot better of a
Mhm.
job. Because what we're doing right now, essentially, as far as I can tell, because we got rid of the encampment protocol. And I'll be the first to say, this wasn't some silver bullet. It wasn't some wonderful thing that was going to solve all the problems. What it was doing, though, was it providing a bit of predictability for people. It meant that if you had seen a person out and living in a tent and you were an outreach worker and you wanted to find them again, you knew where to find them. If you wanted to give them help or connect them with housing, you could come back maybe in a week and they'd still be there. Now, we've outlawed all public space for people to be, and when people are met by bylaw officers and police, the first question they ask is, okay, I can't stay here, you're telling me, where can I stay?
Mhm.
And the answer is,
I don't
we
know.
don't have any shelter for you because shelters are all full.
Mhm.
We don't have any housing for you because there's no housing left. And they say again, well, where can I stay? And they said, well, you can't stay here. And the answer is, they can stay nowhere. So we're just chasing people from public space to public space to public space. It's cruel.
Isn't it also expensive as well?
Of course, it's
Yeah.
extremely
The
expensive.
police, it's more
Extremely
expensive than actually putting them. Well, I'm not saying that there's room in shelters and stuff like that, but I believe it'd be more expensive to have these police officers or bylaw officers, like you said, they're on the clock as well, going there and being like, okay, you can't stay here. And I believe that there would be other costs associated with that. It just seems like it's not sort of like an equal proportion at all.
Well, there are certain vacancies in apartment buildings around the city.
Mhm.
We could just give money to people who don't require supports to live on their own. Because when you think about it a little bit more, there's a group of people who've been deprived of housing. Some of those individuals require some support to live on their own.
Mhm.
Some don't. In fact, many don't. What about all those individuals who don't require support? We could just be giving them money to be able to live somewhere. If we did that instead of spending money on policing, we'd be actually helping the problem. Right now, instead, we're just chasing people from place to place to place and telling them you don't have a right to exist.
Yeah.
And so, what we've learned and what we've studied and what we know from evidence is that the more you chase someone, the more you come after them, the more they have to move, the likelier it is that they'll be harmed, and people have died from that experience. And think about just how disheartening it is.
Yeah.
Let's just say that you were traumatized. One of the reasons that you're living alone is because maybe somebody in your life died, which happens to a lot of people. They maybe had one person in their family, had a small family. The person that they were relying on for support passed away.
Mhm.
You have a couple of belongings from that person that are left to you, and you have them in your tent now living in a park. People come by and they take all your belongings and throw them in the garbage and then ask you to move. For someone who's holding on to very little, who's got a lot of hopelessness perhaps because of seeing the situation in front of them being really difficult. What does that do to them? How does that put them at more risk? So chasing people from place to place, I think, is absolutely inhumane. So I didn't support us going down this road.
Yeah.
I was one of only 2 or 3 people who said no to that, though. The other 12, 13 people on council voted in favor of it. And so that's
majority
unfortunately,
vote,
yeah,
right?
that's
Okay.
unfortunately one of the things in this job, right, is that you get one vote and you can do your best to educate others and ask them to be compassionate and caring and not to take on these kinds of approaches, but you get one. And sadly, when those things happen, that's kind of it for the term of council. You have to wait till the next term before you can change things. But I think really and fundamentally, one of the things we haven't explored enough is just literally taking the resources and the money we have, giving it to people to give them housing. And yeah, it's going to be tricky. We're going to have to find a landlord who's willing to take on someone who maybe isn't going to be an ideal tenant from their perspective. They're looking for someone who's got an excellent credit rating, looking for someone who's got all this kind of stuff. And so it takes some negotiation to get those folks into housing. But if we perhaps hired a team of people who did that and then got people into this housing by paying for their rent for a certain period of time, that would be way more cost effective. Because the point you made essentially is the difference between proactive services and emergency services. Paramedics, fire, and police are emergency services. Emergency services cost a huge amount of money. Proactive services don't.
Yeah.
So if we were able to do this proactively and also get the province to get off their asses, frankly, and set up some urgent care clinics around here, why don't they set up more urgent care clinics and safe injection sites and places like that for people to go? Because if you don't have a place for people to use drugs safely, what are they going to do? Use them unsafely.
Yeah.
And so when they use them unsafely, they're more at risk of death. Right. I mean, exactly. Use them in public. They're more likely to overdose if they don't know what's in their drugs. There's no more necessarily safe testing sites for people to be able to test their drugs to make sure that they're okay. So what we've done is we've set people up to absolutely fail. And then while we've done that, are now kicking them while they're down, blaming them for these situations.
Yeah.
Instead of providing the services that they need. Drugs aren't going to go away. Drugs have been being used by people for thousands of years. So we can keep warring with the idea that it shouldn't be happening, but it's going to keep happening. And all of us self-regulate ourselves anyways. People who drink coffee in the morning are regulating. People
pretty
who go
bad
to
with self-regulation when it comes to coffee, I'll say that.
all of us are. People who go to the safe consumption site called their local bar are treated very differently than someone else who wants to go to a safe consumption site to use an opioid.
Yeah.
Why? Why is there a difference between harmful things like alcohol and harmful things like opioids? We have to get around this as a culture, or we're going to keep going in circles about this and going in circles and going in circles. And ultimately, it seems like it's more about punishing people and punishing people for being poor and not having something than it is for demonstrating that as a society, we're moving forward and having a better understanding of the inequalities that exist, right? And I get it, though, to be honest, that it's tough for people who are living in neighborhoods that wake up every day. They're confronted sometimes with violence. They're confronted with drug use. They may have children who they're worried about in their neighborhood. And that's totally fair, and I respect that. But the solution to this isn't to keep chasing them from place to place. Yeah. That's not the answer.
The solution is to give them a voice, which council said no to.
Pretty much.
You said, yeah. Sorry, I don't want to put you on the spot or anything there, but I just wanted to ask, what do you think the reason why most of the council members voted no to that proposition?
Politics. That's the answer.
Like bureaucracy in terms of
No, I mean like just red meat politics. I think that when you look out into society and you listen just broadly, you hear certain cues and certain notes, right? You hear people saying, I don't like this anymore, or I do like more of this. And you feel people moving in a certain direction. I think for councillors here, they're focused on what the residents in their ward, that they interact with, they're saying. And they always make it seem like they're interacting with everyone. I'm not interacting with everyone here. There are only so many hours in the day. And 40,000 residents means if I was to divide my time up over 4 years outside of meetings, each resident would get 1 minute of my time.
Yeah.
And there's no way to reach 40,000 people. So it's about the circle of people they build around themselves. Some people call that their base, right? So there's a base of people they build themselves around. And from their perspective, what they're hearing from that base of individuals is, I don't like this. I want you to vote against it because I don't like it. And so sometimes councillors will vote based on what they're hearing in the public rather than basing their votes on facts and evidence. The facts and evidence are really clear about what does and doesn't work. Council's been presented
Even
on
a McMaster student got it.
Council has been presented on it many times by experts. We know what the truth is and we know what works. But some people are more interested in getting reelected, I think, than they are in following the facts and evidence and doing what's right. And it's hard, I'm not going to lie. It's hard to stick to your values in a job like this.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of pressure from people who want you to do things differently. So, when I ran, I put a platform together and it said, this is what I'm going to do. Here are my values.
Yeah.
And I put a detailed platform together that said, this is what I'm going to do. I got into office, started doing it. And people said, oh, you're actually going to do that? It's like, I promised I would.
It's
What do
like
you mean?
that's
What
what
do you
I
mean?
that's what I ran on. Yeah.
But I think the attitude is, well, you just did that to get elected and to tell people, and now you're here.
Hmm.
We want you to kind of fall in line. And my response was, nope, I'm accountable to the people who elected me. And I told them this is what I was going to do. I'm going to stick by it. But I'm not going to lie. It's not easy to do.
Hmm.
Not only do you get pressure from some people who don't want you to do it for whatever reason, people around the horseshoe try and pressure you, they try and embarrass you publicly, all kinds of things to get you to change your mind.
Hmm.
And I think it's really, really difficult in spaces like this to stick to your values, but we got to do it.
Yeah.
There's no point in running and saying you're running for something just to turn around and stab everybody who supported you in the back.
Yeah, I agree. That's a really powerful statement there. I just wanted to go over one more policy thing and then a couple of
Sure.
fun questions. Sorry,
Yeah.
I don't want to take too much of your time.
No, I'm happy to answer them.
So I know you ran a campaign on open government and community impact, and like I said earlier, you do Ward 2 newsletters. You have Substack posts. Your pitch is that people should know why decisions are being made, not just what decisions are being made, and I think that's really helpful because a lot of people, again, that's why I'm doing this interviews.
Yeah.
People don't understand what's going on, but I just wanted to talk about can you share a time feedback from whether it's a constituent or someone completely that you've never met before in the community, where their feedback changed your mind or shaped the decision, like one powerful moment?
Yeah, there's been a lot.
Hmm.
I think that one of the things that happens at council is we get delegates to come in. And those delegates are people who come forward on a specific issue. They come to a committee meeting, and they say, I really want to speak about the stormwater issue. I want to speak about homelessness.
Hmm.
And they talk to us. And so we get that kind of formal interaction quite a bit. So there's lots of examples of times people have come forward and said things. And of course, it's made me think about, I hadn't thought about it that way, or I wonder. But for me, I spend a lot of time in the streets. So I live downtown. I'm out downtown all the time. And it's weird because we haven't had a councillor in Ward 2 as of today. I'm the first one in 15 years who's lived downtown. And so our last councillor didn't live here. And so what really I think I've been lucky to have is that exposure to people.
Hmm.
And 99% of it is very friendly stuff. People are cool. There's some jerks, but people are mostly cool and they want to come up and talk to you. I think what's changed some of my perspective around how I communicate, the decisions I make, how I make those decisions, has been hearing that feedback from people. There's not kind of one lightning rod moment, I think, where I had a conversation with someone and it really changed my mind, because I spent so much time having those conversations before I got elected.
Hmm.
My platform was built with going to knocking on doors and asking people what they wanted and then putting it to action.
Yeah.
I spent 4 years before I got elected, out there in the streets at every community event talking to people. And so my view is that really what I'm doing is trying to listen over the long term, not try to be impacted by one person. I think it's actually quite dangerous in a way. I think I'd be worried if there was a conversation that you have with one people that totally changed your value system or totally changed the way you were going. I think having a collective approach is good. But I will say to you that people have stopped me and said things I was surprised to hear. That this thing that you did was something I didn't like, or this thing you did was something I really, really loved. Whereas I may be going about my day, had done that as a thing that I was just doing. I hadn't given it a lot of thought, but then to see the impact from people who'd stopped me multiple times, sometimes saying, this was really great, I'm glad you did that, and thinking, So that kind of one-to-one feedback is super, super important. And honestly, I'm surprised by it. I'm surprised so many people are paying attention to some of the things that I say and do. I tend not to take myself too seriously. I take this job seriously, I'll tell you that,
Yeah.
but I don't take myself very seriously. And so that's been a big learning for me, and it's helped sometimes shape maybe what I say, where I say it, who I say it to. Because I can often say things sometimes and then afterwards think, maybe that wasn't the best way to say that. Because I tend to sometimes think of things academically or think of things, metaphorically, and then think, well, that didn't land very well. I should maybe have said something that made more sense, because people were confused by that. So that's been the big takeaway for me, is really trying to find ways to express myself that aren't just about reaching perhaps a group of people who I think may already be understanding what I'm saying, but reaching a really broad audience and trying to make myself more accessible. It's why I've started to do a lot more TikTok videos. It's why I've started to write more newsletters, because I find that everyone needs to be reached in a different way. We've had 83, I think, town halls, community events, and meetings in the last 3 years. And that whole group of people who love to attend those is one audience who wants to hear me talk about something and ask me questions. Then there's a group who don't want to talk to me. They want to just see the video. There's some groups who just want to read about something, right? So that's been the big takeaway for me from people, has been about changing the way that I approach this job, is getting that feedback from people on the street. You're at the farmer's market, someone just grabs you by the elbow and says, hey, I want to ask you something, or I want to tell you something. So that's been the biggest learning for me. But I can't think of a specific moment where one individual conversation changed everything. I really think that advice is a spectrum, learning is a spectrum, and really You should try and approach that in a community-based way, and not let one or two people, no matter how good their advice is, right, be the only answer. I like to take that information, I learn it, and then I go talk to 25 people, 35 people, 45 people about it, and then get their feedback on what that person said.
I think like perhaps too, like it's maybe not just about individuality, but more a collective, um, like a collective response or collective advice between what you talked about. Because you said, you're on TikTok, you're writing newsletters. So I feel like maybe hearing, because you're somebody who again ran on openness and accountability. So you're out here, you're in the street, like you said, at the farmers market talking to people. You're on TikTok talking to people. You're writing letters talking to people. So possibly like the collective advice about being so open has allowed sort of like a conglomerate, like a lot of advice coming your way, something that you can kind of like just really like center yourself around.
Well, it's hard to filter it all, honestly, too. And so because I'm very active on social media in terms of being on Facebook and responding to posts and being Instagram, also, there's a lot of text coming my way. People type comments, right? So what I want to do is I want to make sure I haven't also reacted too quickly to something. So when someone tells me something, I think, that's my approach is, that's interesting. I haven't heard that before. And so what I do is I'll take that information and then I kind of put it out there. I say, this is what I'm hearing. And I'll say it at a council meeting maybe, or a committee meeting. I'll say something in a newsletter. I'll say something on the internet. And then I just wait to see kind of what are people saying back to me? How are they reacting to me? And then I go back to my platform every time and I say to myself, what did I say I was going to do? Right? And how does it match up with what I said I was going to do? Is this line up with the values I put forward? If it doesn't, then I don't do it. Because that's what I said I was going to do. It's not that I'm so rigid also, I can't go off that script. Things happen, things change. You change your mind, you realize that there's some things on my list of platform items that were totally unrealistic. That I'm probably never going to be able to do. There's some things that were so easy to do, I was shocked. That was like, wow, that was a really simple activity. I didn't realize I would be able to get through that one motion, now it's done. So you have to adjust, and you have to be flexible. And that's
adaptability.
What the point of having all these conversations is just trying to really get a sense from as big a group of people as possible of what they think about ideas, right? And not just take the 4 trolls on the internet's opinions.
I think that's great. Thank you for the 3 policy questions. I just had some like fun little quick questions to go over. If you had to choose coffee or tea?
Tea.
Tea? You're a big tea person?
Every time. I don't drink coffee at all.
You don't drink coffee at all?
No.
Is there a spot for tea that's your personal favorite?
Yeah, my kitchen. I'm a big fan of just like a really boring lemon and ginger tea. Just get a knife, cut some pieces of ginger up, cut some pieces of lemon in, put some hot water in and drink it. That's really my story. I like herbal teas. There's this beautiful tea from the mountains of Greece that an old friend of mine used to make. And so every time I get to see her, that's the thing I love the most.
There you go. Great. Cats or dogs? I know you write a lot about animals. Cats or dogs?
That's a tough choice. I have a cat now, so I'm going to say cats because she'd be mad if I didn't, right?
Yeah.
But I had a dog for many years and loved him very much. So yeah, I love both, but cats for sure. I think everyone knows.
A little bit biased there because you have a cat right now.
I do, yeah.
Would you rather go to an art crawl or head to a Hamilton Tiger Cats game?
Art crawl every time.
Yeah.
I think the nice thing about art crawl as opposed to a Tiger Cats game is that the Tiger Cats games are often about the spectacle of it, right? You have an audience who's looking inward at what's happening with a bunch of people. And of course, you interact with one another. You talk to one another at a sports game to a certain extent. And if you're in that area where everyone's cheering, of course, everyone kind of knows each other and you go out for drinks maybe afterwards or beforehand. I think it's different about an art crawl. It's much more interactive, right? It's at the same level. Everyone's treated the same way. You're not up there. There's not a group of important people down here doing something. It's for everybody.
Yeah.
Anyone can come. One of the things I love about art crawl the most is it's not organized by anybody. It's just a grassroots event that you show up to. And there's a tiny bit of structure in terms of where we close the roads and some structure around where garbage cans and washrooms are placed. Otherwise, have at it. Some people love it, some people don't, but it's a very Hamilton thing, right? And so there's some challenges there. And that's the thing I love the most is being there, being able to help people get through those challenges, addressing tricky problems, right? And that's what art crawl is about. It's a bit messy. That's why I love Hamilton.
There you go. I love that. So if you had somebody come here from a completely different country and they decided to land in Ward 2 and let's just say your job is to show them around, I know that's obviously not what you do, but let's say it's something that just landed on your plate. What's one place in Ward 2 that you would take them?
Bayfront Park. I think Bayfront Park offers a really unique glimpse into what Hamilton's all about. It's just a reality check for people. Because as you approach Bayfront Park, and I'd like to go there in the spring if I had the choice, if you approach Bayfront Park, you'd see all these wonderful cherry blossom trees that line the path going up. You probably also, while you were there though, see some folks who are experiencing homelessness around the edges of the park, some folks living there. And you get to get a sense of the fact that that's a thing in Hamilton. When you go down the little hill into the areas there's a bunch of little kind of waterways and pieces that connect to the larger harbor, where you can see all kinds of wildlife, little frogs and things, small birds and squirrels. And as you get into Bayfront Park more, you see all kinds of other wildlife, and then you get out to the tip there where you can see the harbor, you can see what's happening in the bay, you can see the high level bridge, you can see the trees, you can see Carroll's Point, right? So I think it gives you, it's a great conduit. If you keep going down the bicycle path for a very short distance, you get to Princess Point, right? So it's a wonderful way for people to see that the thing about Hamilton I think people love the most, which is that it's a busy, vibrant, rusty kind of city, but there's so much natural beauty here. Dundas Valley Conservation Area. There's huge swaths of connections to the Bruce Trail here. And that little glimpse for Hamiltonians of Bayfront Park, but I think taking them to Bayfront Park is part of it too. I don't want to show up in Bayfront Park. I want us to get on the Sobe bicycle down by City Hall, ride the bicycle all the way down Bay Street together, and come to the park to them to see, look, we have some infrastructure here that's allowing you to access this, that we are in the heart of the city, but we're also connected to nature. I think it's both things for people. They have to see that this is a wonderful place to live and it's a vibrant downtown, but also that we have so much to offer in terms of our natural landscapes.
It's amazing. Yeah, great answer. Two more questions. Best advice you've gotten from a resident since being elected? I know we talked about like singular advice, but has there ever been a moment, like whether or not you're out in the street or anywhere else, where like somebody, not even, it doesn't even have to be advice, just like a compliment, something that like really struck you, that made me feel like, wow, I'm making a difference. I'm making like a good impact here, and like, yeah.
Yeah, I think what the best advice I've gotten from residents in the street is keep going. What they say is that, there are going to be hurdles in this job. There are going to be situations that are pitched as a scandal. There's going to be things you do that are wrong. You screw something up and you look like a bit of an idiot in the press. And I had once someone stop me right there, right by the bicycle station as I was returning a bicycle. And she was an older woman. She grabbed my elbow and she just said, and if you keep doing that consistently, people will see, oh, this person stands for this. This is what they said they were going to do. And it's been really amazing. Taking that advice has been great. It's been very helpful in this job.
It's amazing. And to end off, I just have one last thing. If you could finish the sentence, please. Hamilton is at its best when
everyone is demonstrating solidarity with one another, no matter what the situation is. That's more the best, is when we're working together. And as a union town, as a town that's built on labor, as a place that has been scrappy for hundreds of years, solidarity is where we live. So if we're all showing up together to demonstrate that we care about something, if when one of us is harmed, the rest of us show up to make sure that that person's okay, that's when the best of Hamilton comes out.
Well, that's amazing. Thank you everybody for joining us, and we thank you for giving us your time.
Happy to.